A dying warrior kneels in the mud, blood soaking through his armor. Behind him, 30,000 rifles rise slowly out of the fog. He does not run. He does not beg. He simply waits for a death he chose the moment he picked up his sword. 500 samurai, 30,000 Imperial soldiers, one mountain, and a war that would end 700 years of history in a single morning. This is the last stand of the samurai, and almost everything you think you know about it is incomplete. Mount Shiroyama, September 24th, 1877. The rain has not stopped for hours, mixing with smoke, with mud, with the breathing of dying men. Through the fog comes a sound this forest has never heard: artillery, and the grinding scream of Gatling guns, tearing through centuries-old cedar trees. One man stands closest to the guns, holding nothing but a forged steel katana. His name is Saigo Takamori. He already knows how this ends, because the man who helped build modern Japan is about to be destroyed by the very nation he created. That is the story no one tells you. Why would Japan's greatest hero choose certain death, fighting against the very emperor he once helped place on the throne? The answer begins years earlier, with a decision this man never wanted to make, and a promise his country broke first. What happened on this hillside would be whispered about by soldiers for the rest of their lives. A battle fought for something larger than victory. To understand how it ends, we have to go back, because Saigo Takamori was not born a rebel. By nearly every account, he was a hero. He was one of the sword-dams who helped restore Emperor Meiji to power, an architect of the new Japan that promised to remake a nation. Even as his influence grew, Saigo lived simply, refused luxury, and was widely regarded by contemporaries as almost incorruptible for a man of his rank. But the new Japan he helped build arrived carrying Western rifles, Western railways, Western frock coats, and a question no one wanted to answer honestly. The Meiji government believed Japan had only one path forward: modernize completely, or be conquered like so much of Asia already had been. It was not cruelty that drove them. It was fear. Fear of foreign gunboats, foreign empires, and a world moving faster than tradition could survive. But that meant the samurai, warriors for 700 years, were suddenly told their entire way of life was now obsolete. In 1876, the government banned swords in public. Samurai stipends were abolished. Centuries of identity dissolved by a handful of new laws. Imagine being told your bloodline, your training, your entire reason for waking each morning is now illegal, mocked and quietly erased by decree. Saigo watched former warriors, men who once commanded respect with a glance, sink into poverty, their pride ground down by modernization's machinery. He could not simply watch. He withdrew to his home province of Satsuma and opened private academies for the young men Japan had discarded. These academies became a sanctuary where discipline and honor still meant something, though most of the young men there had never fired a rifle in real combat. The imperial government grew uneasy. Saigo was already a living legend, surrounded by thousands of armed, disillusioned young men. That was a dangerous thing. Tensions rose for months. Government agents were caught investigating Satsuma. Students accused them of plotting to assassinate Saigo, and outrage spread like fire. In January 1877, students raided a government arsenal, seizing weapons before Saigo could stop them. The decision that would end his life had already begun. Saigo returned from a hunting trip to find his province on the edge of open war. There was no version of this story where he stayed neutral. "I have no choice but to march," he reportedly told his officers, a reluctant general walking toward a war he never wanted. Nearly 30,000 samurai rallied to his banner within weeks, a wave of steel and fury marching north toward the fortress city of Kumamoto. But courage alone cannot stop a bullet. The imperial army was built from peasant conscripts, yet those farmers' sons carried modern rifles. Saigo's men did not. The rebellion opened with a siege at Kumamoto Castle, a fortress built centuries earlier to withstand exactly this kind of grinding assault. It was here Saigo first understood a chilling truth. His elite warriors were dying by the dozens, cut down by conscripts holding standard rifles. Katana against Gatling gun. Discipline against industry. Cold steel that once decided the fate of provinces was now nearly useless against cannon fire. Several of the imperial officers commanding those cannons had once trained under Saigo himself. Now they were ordered to destroy him. Week after week, the samurai army was pushed back and bled out in the rain. 30,000 men dwindling to 3,000, then to 1,000. By September, Saigo was a hunted man in his own homeland, retreating toward the very city where the uprising began, Kagoshima, and the hill above it. On Mount Shiroyama, 500 exhausted, starving men fortified what little ground remained. surrounded by 30,000 Imperial troops and rising. The siege ring closed slowly. You could smell gunpowder in the wet air, mixing with smoke from villages already burning in the distance. There was no food left. Men ate wild grass and bark. They bandaged wounds with strips of torn silk, saving cloth for the dying. Some of the wounded whispered for water. There was almost none left to give them. Their comrades could only sit beside them in silence. Yet the camp on Shiroyama was strangely, unnervingly quiet. No panic, no pleading, only the discipline of men who had already made peace with death. General Yamagata Aritomo, the imperial commander, had once studied under men close to Saigo. According to later accounts, he wept while drafting a final letter. "Surrender," the letter reportedly urged. "Your life is worth more than this hill." A former ally, begging a doomed legend to simply walk away. Saigo read the letter by firelight, the paper trembling in his weathered hands. Not from fear, historians note, but from the weight of the choice. Beside him stood Beppu Shinsuke, his loyal lieutenant, a young officer who should have had decades of life still ahead of him. Saigo never sent a reply. In the samurai code, silence itself could be an answer, and this silence told Yamagata everything he needed to know. On the night of September 23rd, the men gathered quietly. A single cup of sake passed hand to hand in near total silence. They sharpened their blades one final time, steel scraping against stone, echoing softly through dark, rain-heavy cedar trees around the camp. Almost to a man, they knew morning would bring the end. What remained in their control was only this: how that ending would look. September 24th, 3:45 in the morning. The sky is pitch black. Without warning, Imperial artillery opens fire on the sleeping hillside. The mountain shakes violently. Trees splinter into fragments. Earth erupts skyward, lit for an instant by flashes of muzzle fire. Under this bombardment, the 500 remaining samurai do something no Imperial commander expected. They do not hide. They do not wait to die. They rise. They draw their swords in near total darkness and let out a war cry that carries down the hillside, chilling young conscripts below. And then they charge, straight down the slope, directly into the guns, with nothing between them and death but distance and momentum.
It is reckless. It is close to suicide. And yet, in that instant, it becomes something almost impossible to describe. Terrible and strangely glorious. They slam into the first Imperial line like a breaking wave, katana blades cutting through rifles and bayonets in the pre-dawn darkness. The young conscripts panic. Most have never faced men who fight with such total disregard for their own survival, and the line begins to buckle. Close quarters combat erupts across the hillside. Steel meets steel, the smell of blood and gunpowder thick in the cold morning air. For a few brief minutes, the samurai are winning. For one intoxicating moment, it feels as though the old order might claw its way back. Saigo pushes forward with his men, moving through the mist like something out of legend. As the Imperial front line begins to collapse before them, soldiers drop their rifles and run. Somewhere in the chaos, the samurai roar, the sound of spirit briefly overwhelming machinery. You can almost feel it yourself, that flicker of impossible hope, the sense that honor might, just this once, outlast bullets and iron. They break through the first barricades. Open ground lies beyond the valley. For a heartbeat, survival itself feels within reach. But Saigo, watching the retreating soldiers, shows no relief. His expression hardens instead, as though some colder instinct has just spoken to him. Because this retreat is not panic, it is bait. A deliberate lure, drawing the last samurai deeper into ground the Imperial army had already chosen. As the fog thins, the true Imperial line comes into view. Gatling guns, artillery, thousands of rifles, already aimed, already waiting. The trap closes completely. No ground left to advance into, no path left open behind them. Only the guns and the rain. A single order cuts through the darkness. Fire! The entire hillside answers back in one deafening wall of sound and flame. A sheet of lead tears through the samurai ranks in seconds. The glorious charge collapses instantly into something closer to slaughter than battle. Still, they do not retreat. Men keep moving forward, swinging blades at empty air even as they fall, refusing to let the charge end in flight. Saigo stumbles. A round shatters his hip, severing an artery. He collapses into the mud, and for a heartbeat, even the guns seem far away. Pain floods through him, blinding and total. Yet witnesses would later describe his face as remaining almost entirely, unnervingly calm. He understands immediately that this is the end. He looks up to find Beppu Shinsuke already at his side, having fought through fire to reach him. Saigo points weakly down the slope, toward a quiet clearing beneath a solitary tree, sheltered for a moment from the direct line of fire. Shindon, he is said to have whispered, using an old, affectionate nickname. I think this spot will do. A soldier's final, understated request. Beppu lifts his master and carries him from the worst of the fighting, bullets still cutting through the air around them as they move downhill. Saigo kneels in the wet earth, turning his body to face the direction of the Imperial Palace far off in Tokyo, and bows his head. According to later tradition, he then draws his short blade, the wakizashi, cold steel catching the faint gray light of dawn. This is seppuku, ritual suicide, reclaiming in his final act the honor a rapidly modernizing world had tried for years to take from him. Beppu stands behind him, tears cutting through dirt and gun smoke, his sword raised, ready to complete his final duty as second. He must be the Kaishakunin, the one who ends his master's suffering quickly, sparing him prolonged agony in his final moments on the hillside. Forgive me, Beppu is said to have whispered before the blade fell, a swift end to the man later remembered as the last true samurai. Historians still debate the precise details of that final moment, but on the outcome itself, every surviving account fully agrees. Seeing their leader fall, the remaining 40 samurai do not surrender and do not scatter. Instead, as one, they turn back toward the guns. They draw their swords one final time and charge directly into the cannon fire, until not a single man among them is left standing. By 7 that morning, the mountain has gone completely silent. Rain slowly washes the blood from the churned, smoking earth of Shiroyama. Imperial soldiers climbing the hill found Saigo's body. According to multiple accounts, several of them knelt in the mud and wept. They had won the battle completely, yet many understood in that quiet moment they had just helped kill something larger than one man. The Satsuma Rebellion was over. Within years, the samurai class that shaped Japan for 7 centuries had disappeared into history. Then, in 1889, the same government that hunted Saigo officially pardoned his name. The man who helped build modern Japan became the man modern Japan destroyed. Empires fade, weapons change, but his name, the world never forgot.